that,
Yes.
that the president said that if this continues, then they will have to empty Tehran in the summer. So where there will be no water. I mean, good Lord, where are we?
Well, this is, as you can see, is the end result of certain claims, you know. Without water, the air is polluted, the soil is polluted, and they're just trying to pass one day to the
Yeah.
next. So, but I wanted to ask you about something you said in the previous video. So
I don't remember what I said in the previous video.
you said something really interesting. And since today's Saturday, basically two questions to elevate our souls in the middle of all this news of
Yeah, exactly. That's a that's a worthy a worthy thing to do. Yeah.
So let's elevate it to the seventh heaven associated with Saturn traditionally, because today is Saturday, day of Kronos, Saturn,
Protos, yeah, of course.
and a planet in mythology associated with architecture. So one of my questions was for you, to whatever comes to your mind regarding this issue of Saturn and architecture and buildings associated with Saturn, Saturnine buildings, if one could say. You know, for example, Vitruvius talks about how certain columns, such as Doric column, you know, belong to temples of certain gods, while Corinthian columns belong to like Aphrodite. Doric are more
Yeah.
Saturnine gods, if I'm not mistaken. In the modern world, if one designs a Saturnine building, how would one go about that? Say a bank, a government building, a state building. What are the things to consider? And architects wearing black, has that got anything to do with it?
Oh God,
What's
yeah.
that?
I mean, you know, I'm just yesterday I went again for the second time to a building that was housed a very Saturnine, a very Saturnine exhibit in a way. But the building it's a Frank Gehry building, and it is the foundation of what is it? Let's see. I sort of block it out of my mind. I'll find it. Oh, here it is. Louis Vuitton. So it's supposed to be like an exhibit building and all that in the middle of a beautiful park, really beautiful park, the Bois de Boulogne. And, you know, like all the buildings of Frank Gehry, you know, it's just a mishmash of things that that are very expensive. And they're supposed to convey some kind of an advertising message, a brand message, and so on and so forth. And so this building has this core of sort of rather compressed and not very attractive exhibit spaces, including a very sort of like weird kind of entry spot, and then it is covered with how would you call it, a layer of very expensive semi-transparent or translucent feathers. And we're talking about huge things, you know, I mean, they're huge, that are attached to the core by a very expensive and very complex and very also um, unreasonable structure, steel and laminated wood structure. And it's all very curvy and everything else. And from far, it was, we were talking with the students and I wanted to, they said, oh, what do you think about that? I said, oh, it's more important for me to know what you think. So they had some, they like, what is going on here? You have these things that really serve for nothing except show. And are these beautiful? Is their function to make things beautiful? It's like the capital of a column, is it? And uh, so there was a peacock going around, and I said, this building, wants, wants to be a peacock, because it wants to, a male peacock, it wants to advertise something, it talks, oh, I'm here, I'm beautiful and all that. But in the end, it is still a bird, but it's a dead pigeon. It's it is not a peacock. And much of what is happening now, not all of it, but much of it is, at least much of what is coming out in the news, in the architecture things, on all the things that people in black, the architects in black, admire and talk about. These are it's this kind of building, a building that calls attention to itself, that is um, very expensive, that is addressing itself to a clientele of very wealthy people. And the patronage is also very wealthy. It's not like the state, and then sort of is condescending to the rest of the people, it's like, okay, you can come in to pay your ticket and, we're open to everybody and that kind of thing. So I don't know if this kind of architecture eats its children. and whether this, because of this, it is saturnine, but I don't think that this is what Vitruvius meant. I mean, Vitruvius had uh, I think he was very close to Saturn, a lot closer than we are, and he could associate um, celebrations and religious rituals and with Saturn, and in contrast with other deities. So I don't know. It's a difficult. I mean, I would have to think a lot about this question, Habib. There's no easy answers coming to me because it's also because Saturn is not part of the. Saturn is a pre-Olympian deity. It's not. Uh, it is before Zeus and the 12 and the Olympian people and so on and so forth. And I don't know, it is not even a chthonic, like an underworld deity either, like Dionysius. So I'll have to really think about that. As for the architects wearing black, I mean, I don't know. I'm wearing black, you're wearing black right now here. Actually, mine is blue.
Well, in ancient symbology, they are interchangeable. They are both colors of Saturn, dark blue, black.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
And but that opens so many other questions. Thank you for pointing that building out. A dead pigeon that wants to pretend it's a peacock. I mean, depending how we look at Saturn, I mean, one can look at Saturn as marking time, great measures of time, as pain, as melancholy, as stability,
Yeah,
as someone who sets the limits, something that wants to be grand. But the way you describe this building, it seemed like an imitation, like an unhappy imitation, like it's trying to be grand, but it's not. it's a sort of an
Yeah,
inversion.
it's a consumer thing, you know. These are very, you know, on one hand it's like this, on the other hand it is a building, and it exists, and it exists for everyone. And yeah, it's an ad in a way for the people that funded it. So it doesn't have, or perhaps it does, you know. I mean, it's the modern gods of consumerism and capitalism and all that, and it is a temple to all of this. And perhaps it is a Saturnine temple. Um, it's a yeah, but the person whose work was shown was a very, very big show. It was an old now, you know, he's like 92 years old, 93 years old, a German painter by the name of Richter, Gerhard Richter. And he has very interesting images. This guy he worked from photographs. He never worked from nature. He never worked outside. He only worked in his atelier. Uh, he was still is. I mean, he's still active now. He does things on the computer because he can't really, you know, do it on, you know, he's physically not able to do it. So, and he has a lot of essentially monochromatic things. You know, he's a lot of questions about um, what is an image, and you know, where does the image exist, and how does it exist, and what does it represent, and does it represent um, so he has a whole series of really black and white uh, paintings, oil paintings that are very hazy in a way, but also very accurate. And he has these are paintings from photographs, black and white photographs. And they're transformed. The photographs are transformed because these are, you know, little photographs, you know, like, you know, 2 or 3 inches long, you know, and these are, you know, very big paintings. And some of them are people, and some of them are landscapes. And there really, I mean, a lot of black in this exhibit. And at the other side of it, he has these abstract paintings that are full of almost violent color, and that are more recent in a way. Um, so I came out of that also with a lot of questions about, you know, what is painting, and you know, why does one paint, and but these, in many ways, these paintings were very well, I mean, very well painted, beautifully painted. They're very much very Saturnine in a way. And the people visiting, well, you see that a lot in Paris. And Paris right now is overcast and you know, dark, and you know, days are small and so on, and wet. And the people in there, I mean, you didn't see one speck of color. Everybody was dressed in black, which I thought was interesting. It's like everybody's dressed in black, or you know, very dark clothes, and the French tend to do that. I mean, the French tend to dress in black clothes or in dark clothes. Yeah, this very you throw a rock at me now. And I cannot eat the rock like Kronos did, you know.
Let me connect it to the next question, which was my original idea. In our previous talk, you mentioned something that artists and architects, they bring hope and understanding of things beyond logic. And this is something that you said organized religion, all denominations have done away with. They say things about it because they have to,
Oh yeah, yeah.
but in effect, so this sort of silent, may I say such a thing, bringing of hope and understanding of things beyond logic by proportion, by shapes, by can you elaborate on this and how it's different from what theology, talking about it? How do they differ? And yeah, please.
I'll tell you, I mean, and people have written, there's a very good, I don't remember who wrote it, but a very good uh, essay about, how people's relationship to architecture and art has changed. And, it has changed first because people started reading and not reading buildings. Buildings stopped having this kind of relationship with people because people went to the books and art generally. And then the patronage changed, uh, especially in the 19th century. It was not anymore the church or the nobility. It was, perhaps the state, but mostly it was the private patronage that gave artists a great deal of I suppose, liberty. And, this is also part of what is happening with, at a much, much bigger scale, with people like Geary and all these architects. They have to satisfy the patrons, and then the patrons are the multimillionaires, the big companies, the corporations, and so on and so forth. So, uh, uh, and and uh, and so they become part of this sort of big capitalist computer game. I'm sorry, not computer. It is computer too, but a consumer game. So people today react to things more, and we're talking about many people, most people, more as consumers. You consume art. It's a very different relationship, and people do art as I mean, I see artists that work because they work with the understanding that this is a consumer good that they're producing, you know. I went to a little exhibit. There's a foundation, a Giacometti Foundation. You know Giacometti. He's a well, French Swiss artist that lived in the 30s and 30s, 40s, and then after the war as well. He did these very elongated uh, sculptures, not very big, very thin, but very primeval. I mean, they look like something that you would have found in a tomb, something that sort of transcends time, you know, and and this is a guy that lived in a room that was that was his studio, that had a floor of a dirt floor here in Paris, and was probably, I don't know, 5 meters by 3 meters. And he slept in that room, and he made his art in that room, and he slept with his wife in that room, and that's where he worked. I mean, that was his life. And he didn't care about selling. He didn't care about he had enough, to he didn't care about being famous. He cared about the people that he associated with, and these people were philosophers and literary people like Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir and all that. And you don't have people like that anymore. Yeah, I don't think so. It's a different world. Yeah, it's a everything has changed, and it's going to change even more. But what I see on the other hand, is that when you give very young people who are not yet, I mean, they're already touched by whatever surrounds them, that you cannot avoid that. They all have, they're addicted to their devices and so on. But when you give them an opportunity to communicate with their own souls through their work, and you don't say, because in architecture schools, we have adopted these things, you're producing something. I'm saying you're not producing anything. You are studying. You are making yourself and the world better. This is why you're here. You're not here to produce. And when you give them, those that take that opportunity and that trust you, because they think, oh yeah, he's saying all this now, but in the end, because they're used to transactions, I give, you give, I take, you give, and so on and so forth. And oh, he's going to give me a bad grade. And once they go beyond that, and they see that you really mean it, I would rather you do 3 failed projects that come from your soul, that you produce something that is okay, it's on time, it fits whatever criteria of production you set up, and you get a good grade for it. And I would say, no, yes, of course, I'm not going to deny a good grade to the product of production, but I'm not going to deny a good grade to an effort that is a genuine effort to understand something. And because that something is difficult to understand, it's failed. So, yeah, I mean, architecture today is, uh, uh, I mean, the architecture, again, you see in the magazines, the things that young people read and that set the trends and so on and so forth, is one thing. On the other hand, you have also, and this is what we try to do with my colleague here, who's of the same mind that I am. We try to acquaint the students with real life architects that are doing alternative things, that are restoring things, that are, uh, they do things that are considered eccentric in a way, and that seem a little bit how would I say, naive in a sense, Um, it's just like your project, Like, so we're going to make a monastery today, that does all these things. So these guys are doing monasteries in the middle of Paris, little monasteries, or they're taking old things and readjusting them, and not just for corporations, but for people, and taking spaces that are abandoned and making them beautiful, really beautiful again, but not in a conventional way. Um, so uh, I don't know. I mean, there's plenty of people like that, and I know that it's very difficult for younger people to buy into that because they need jobs, because all of that. Uh, but some of them will do it. Some of them will do it. I can see, out of a group of 20, I can see 4 or 5 that will eventually do something like this, that will take chances, that will not do what's expected of them nowadays. Yeah. Today, you have put a wall of difficult questions for me, Habib. I have to think about it for a whole month now, about Kronos. But Kronos, uh, Saturn, and all this business of Saturnine and all this stuff, I think is much more of a Western thing, of a Roman thing, than a Greek thing, because in Greece, it's Kronos, not Saturn. And Chronos has an interesting, it's almost like it's not really a homonym, but it's very close to one. Chronos and Chronos. Chronos is time. So like chronology and all that. But chronology is spelled, with CH in Latin, say with a chi in Greek. So there is definitely something nasty about him. He's eating his children, and we usually use Kronos as a warning. I remember an artist, a very, very important and well-known Greek artist, who was also a friend of my parents, and I showed him my work when I was very young, and he liked it a lot. And he said, "No, you shouldn't become an architect. You should become a painter. You should become a sculptor." He said, painting, not sculpture. Painting is real art. Sculpture isn't, because it has to deal with too much material. So, and then he said, because he thought it was my family that was pushing me to do architecture, which was not true. And he said, you have to be careful. Greek families are like Kronos. They eat their children. So we always have this in mind, that as much as we love our family and very part of, we are traditional people, right? We belong to our family, our clan, our, whole thing. And at the same time, you have to be careful, because they may eat you. So the past can eat you. It can devour you. And that's a constant tension, which I find, I cannot escape it. I don't think any one of us can escape. Yeah, you can escape it by not thinking about it, but when you work, you are always between things. It's not this kind of clear-cut idea of the production, right? Okay, so it's almost like you're doing a scientific experiment. I put this and I put that, and then I will, if that works out, I will have this, and I will have this algorithm that will allow me to predict this and that and the other thing. No, it's a different, to use the computer kind of lingo, is a different platform that we, a different level that people like me and you work in. So, and I have no problem with it. I don't have problem with people that work like that either. If they don't have a problem, that's fine.
I was talking earlier on a different subject with my father, and I was trying to explain this idea of chain of, how would I say this? In Platonic philosophy, particularly in its late phase, Neoplatonic philosophy, this chain of knowledge, and how they would see, like at the very top, near to truth and beauty, there's silence, pure
Yeah.
silence. Then a bit lower, it's the language of nature, which is also like not our language. It's not the language of nature.
Yeah.
Doesn't lecture. Nature just shows. And this
Yeah.
is what happened in very ancient religion and mysteries like the Eleusinian mysteries. It wasn't a lecture. It was a sort of like a theater, and which involved architecture and seeing things. And then a bit lower, it's the oral teaching, talking, which is alive, which is living. A lot of things were not committed to writing. It had to be passed on orally. And at the very lowest is writing. But I think in our culture, and this has invaded true art used to be something drier and more important and more elevated than writing and this kind of Aristotelian logic. But now, in the minds of most people, it seems subservient to it. I was reading a very interesting dissertation about it's a dissertation from year 2013 titled Goddesses in Context on Divine Powers, Roles, Relationships, and Gender in Mesopotamian Textual and Visual Sources. And in the beginning, there are some very interesting observations on what I just said. And to quote, it says, visual images have their own language. They are neither translations of text nor to be read like lexical entries. Images are distinguished from words and text by immediate recognition of the total meaning without the time lag in hearing and reading. Further, religious images preceded religious texts, and the importance as well as the experience of seeing did not depend on text, but texts may have been originally inspired by images. Finding the right balance between the independent meaning of images and relevance of textual references is like tightrope walking. Now, when we talk of images, it applies to architecture itself. It is saying something beyond logic in silence, sort of. So it's like music solidified, but also silence solidified. And this was also the concept of in ancient Egypt, they had a hieroglyph for beauty called Nefer, which is like a cross and then a circle at the bottom. And this also had this meaning of music because it looks like an instrument, the rabab, the oud. So music and also music having a stop. So this understanding, to connect it to your earlier discussion, this understanding would create a different kind of architecture and a different effect on people. I mean, they cannot express it in words, but on their soul when they enter such a space, than a space which is involved with all this noise of talking and writing and talking about it. And of course, in our world, with social media and discussions. What do you think of what I just said?
Well, I think that what you just said is what I also said. I mean, people don't relate to their world, whether it's nature, of course, because they have urban people have very little to do with nature anymore. They understand nature through TV and through weather forecasts, and also the built world. It's a very passing. And I would say superficial connection. Also, they're surrounded. Everybody is surrounded by this, sort of multitude of images constantly, constantly bombarding you, and I don't think, and people's lifestyle is one that puts them in constant motion. You don't sit down and look at the world around you. You walk into a metro here in Paris and anywhere else probably in the world, and perhaps 1 out of 20 people is not on their iPhone or whatever phone, smartphone, looking at something. Everybody's, you walk in the street in Paris and there's people on, walking, and they bump into you because they are they're not looking around. And I mean, Paris, man, Paris is an amazing place. It's really beautiful. There's anywhere you work, anywhere you look, you find interesting and beautiful things, or not beautiful things, but at least challenging things. And they're looking at something else. So there is that terrible dissociation, and perhaps it is an escape, like I was driving my son uh, back and forth. I don't know, from some sort of activity this is a long time ago. He was like 10 years old, perhaps even younger. And and I said, we were on this big road in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and typical American road with all the crap, you know. And he's back in the back seat, you know, playing, you know, doing things on social. I don't know what he was doing, but he was not looking at anything. And I said, hey, stop doing this. Look outside. Look at the world. Look outside. So he looks, you know, he leaves his phone, he looks outside, and he says, what do you want me to look at? McDonald's, Exxon, you know, and he starts saying all the things that he was seeing, all these, you know, really awful, you know, places that said, yeah, okay, yeah, I know what they are. So I was defeated. Then we went close to our house, which at that moment was, you know, in a really beautiful part, you know, there's like trees and beautiful light and all that. And I said, now stop it, you know, look around. So he looked around and he said, well, yes, you're right. This is beautiful. Yeah. So we don't, you know, and people now, I mean, because, you know, we're saying, okay, you know, what you said, you know, we abandoned images and you know, we started reading. And now people have found images again, but they're moving images and they don't read anymore. They don't read. I mean, there's no, so they don't read the images and they don't read the text either. So what's happening? Yeah,
Certainly a transitional period.
it's a
Very
transitional period, and but it's also something that has been cultivated by, at least here, not necessarily everywhere else, but in these sort of very uh, advanced Western capitalist societies, it's been um, very, I think, consciously uh, pursued by those in power. You know, the public education system in America has been defunded for
uh-huh.
the last 80 years. So people go to school and they get a ticket that allows you to go further in school and further in school and to get the kinds of credentials and skills, you know, just to become parts of this production machine that essentially, you know, makes uh, the rich people richer and the more powerful people more powerful. And soon enough, these people that are, you know, getting all these skills and all that, and who are supporting the system because they're trained to do so. You know, like, oh, you know, you don't bite the hand that feeds you, right? Well, essentially ignorant and uneducated people. That's why they support those in power, right? And they have no recourse to anything. So, you know, these people will be soon, or many of them will be soon uh, replaced by AI. And what are they going to do then? This is what I'm telling you. I said, you know, I'm teaching you a lot of useless things whose only utility is that, number one, they make you better. Hopefully, they'll make you better people. And second, the things that AI can't do. And that will be necessary for the world. And they get it. They get it. Yeah, I'm not going to live to see this playing out, and it's going to be a long time uh, before. But things do move fast. But also, you know, we tend to look at things from the point of view of at least, we're in the West, I'm in the West. Of course, I look and I read and I do all of that, but, the majority of people don't live in the West. They live in Africa, they live in Asia, they live in South America. So when you go to these places, you see that perhaps there is another way of proceeding. On the other hand, you see that in all of these cultures, the Western model has been adopted, and it's not because of colonialism, but the Western model has been heartily avoided by the ruling classes. They're all together. Doesn't matter whether you're black, white, yellow, red, whatever, you're part of the same clan of people. And we are on a different clan of people, like,
I remember you said we are the Western exiles and we find each other. One of our very first talks. Do you remember? You were reading you were reading the tale of the Occidental exile, and you said people like us are the
oh,
West.
right, yes, exactly. That's true. The Occidental,
We are.
yeah. Yes, and yeah, and people also find their way, I mean, uh, yeah, I mean, I'm not, I mean, there's plenty of reasons to be pessimistic about things, because, you look around and, terrible things are happening all around you and so on and so forth. And, you open the newspapers or, I have to read the newspapers and, on the internet. And I'm at the point where I just read the headlines and I know exactly what is going to follow. I don't need to read the article. Very few times do I read the article and I go very fast. Okay, 2 paragraphs, you've stated what you want to say, goodbye. And just check also the facts. And, uh, we're making the same mistakes we made before. And we are resolving matters that should be also spiritual matters with algorithms. I mean, you cannot do that. You cannot do that. Algorithms exist outside of you. And the most important things in our existence is what we have inside. This whole thing that I think all religions, but especially the Sufis is talking about, is the inside and the outside, the two worlds in which we live that communicate. We are the boundary between them, we are the transformation of the outside to the inside and the inside to the outside. And that's one of the great things about architecture. I mean, one of the great challenges and appeals for me for architecture is that, you form insides in order to connect with the outside and to transform the outside and so on and so forth. But, and, and you can do that deliberately or not. I mean, consciously or not, but no matter whether you do it this way or the other way, that's what happens. That's, once you put a wall and you're on one side of it, you want to be on the other side of it. You have to open a door or a window, and that's, I think that's when art happens. That's when architecture happens. That's when life happens. And that's why I'm very grateful. Alhamdulillah, I'm very grateful for this life. Yeah, I'm very, very grateful. It comes with cost, yeah, but I mean, you're young, you have to, you have a lot longer to appreciate this and to think about it, and you will see more things than I will have time to see. But and things that will either um, in some way things that will have to do with what you prophesy, what you think will happen in the future. Yeah. I mean, I've seen this, I've seen this over and over because I'm almost 80 years old, man. Yeah, this kid yesterday, very, 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 very smart kid. We were up on top of this building. It was cold, and I said, "Let's go. I'm cold." He said, "You're cold. You're wearing all these layers." Yeah, I was wearing a jacket and a vest, and you're cold. I said, "Caleb, I have layers, but I also have 60 years on you." I said, "Oh yeah, yeah, okay, okay, I understand. You're right." Yeah. So yeah, these are all, these are the things that, at least in my case, these are the things that are always in the back of my soul, my mind, and against who's, that Calvino said that beautifully about reading the classics, you know, the experience and all these thoughts, and that's why it's wonderful to talk to you about these things, because you come from just a different place, a different time, and you're young and you're thinking about things, uh, and that makes me very hopeful because people like you will keep on thinking about the things that people like me have thought and before me were thinking, and so on and so forth. So that's not going to be lost, you know. Why are you thinking about Saturn, for crying out loud? I mean, you're in Iran, this back, there's like all these
What
books behind you, and you're thinking about Saturn and connecting Saturn to, people in black and Saturnine and art and architecture and all these things. Why are you doing all this? Is this because you can quantify it and make more money? No, because it's important. It makes you better, and that's once you make, you define your own life, and there's plenty of people that do that, you know. So I'm not pessimistic. I'm not pessimistic. And I walk down. I look down. I'm on the ground. I'm on the first floor of a building in the center of Paris, and I look down at the street, and I see all these people going by constantly. It's a very, very busy street. Even at night, there's people. And I look at them and I say, okay, and they're all shopping and they're carrying bags and they're young and old and this and that. And I say, okay, well, uh, what are these people thinking about? Where are they going? Where are they coming from? And and in a sense, they're all like you. Yeah, it's all good. I have to think hard about Kronos. I have to find my connections with Kronos, Saturn. Uh, this kid, it's interesting you bring it up because I have a very, very good student this semester who is also very talented. He's he, he could be a painter, and he's also very good in architecture, but he draws beautifully and he paints, and uh, he has an exceptional attitude and aptitude as well. And I said, okay, I want you to choose a work of art and copy it and show me, because I have to teach them how to draw. They don't learn how to draw anymore. And somehow think about, how this person that lived a long time ago before you uh, was looking at the world and what they found out about it and so on and so forth. So I said, you want to get in touch with people who survived because of their work and get in touch with them through their work, not just by reading the CV or whatever. And so he made an amazing, it was not a copy, but it was more than a copy. It was just a beautifully understood painting, drawing, but colorful, color drawing painting of Kronos, the Goya, the Goya, yeah, Kronos eating his children. I said, oh my God, I mean, like, why did you choose that? And he couldn't explain to me. He had no words. I said, it was, I thought it was amazing. And I said, okay, that's fine, One day you'll find out why you chose that. But it was really, I mean, just the kid had understood beyond just the image, understood what was going on behind it. Habib, all the way from, you bring inspiration all the way from Shiraz. Wow.
Next week.
I'm glad Kronos did not eat you.
Well, in a way, he did. He eats all of us. I was looking at it from like the philosophical perspective, how Platonists and also this ancient tradition of understanding these planets as sort of like steps on the ladder of ascent to the one,
Yeah.
and Kronos being on the highest heaven is the one who teaches the toughest lessons. But it's sort of they saw in this myth of eating the children as time, which destroys all of us, but it teaches us things. And this cycle that Saturn has, it's around, I think, 29 years. And in some ancient traditional teachings, they saw this cycle as necessary to achieve true mastery of something.
Uh-huh.
Of course, the cycle of Jupiter was important, 12 years, but to be truly a master, one would need to practice something to reach that wisdom of, time looking at everything. And it teaches through like this symbolism of eating the children a lot through pain and melancholy. And they would see in medieval period, Renaissance period, this holistic view of universe that they had, and they saw that a lot of thinkers and artists and architects who they were under the influence of Saturn. They were people with a lot of melancholy, but also this melancholy gave them genius to design things. And since architecture was seen, I mean, we talked about this last time, as sort of this kingly, regal, priestly endeavor. So the buildings that people would go in, and for example, into Hagia Sophia or an ancient temple. I mean, not necessarily a temple to Saturn or Saturnine, but this idea of that you enter a building and it's sort of time stops and you're facing past, future, present, eternity, and being downloaded with this images and geometry and this ritual and silence. I mean, the whole ritual thing is very Saturnine. The whole pageant of to induce a certain state, and this is something that's I mean of course, there's hope. It's a transition period, but it's missing because once ancient mysteries filled it and the organized Abrahamic religions, which were very different. And then with people leaving that, I mean, the cities are not sort of, I would like to hear your thoughts on this, but modern cities are not, they're neither sort of church-centered, sort of religion-centered cities of the medieval period, nor the anthropos, human-centered cities of the Hellenic and Roman times. For example, all those theaters which were open to the public, these colonnaded streets, and importantly, the baths. I mean, something like baths of Caracalla, these magnificent Roman baths, which, if I'm not mistaken, were open to all, to the public. Such a thing doesn't exist anymore, you know. I mean, very rich people, they go to their spas, but then the whole architecture is very different than an experience that you would have. I mean, even malls are not like that. When one looks at these ruins of these great Roman baths, the closest things similar to them are the Catholic churches, you know, that one sees. So it's very, and this question of, you know, that in this transition period, particularly happening in my country, in the world, I mean, how can one design something to sort of bring that beauty and hope uh, back? I mean, it can be a gallery, it can be a park, it can be a simple arch, you know, but to sort of have that effect, to be so powerful that even though most people, you know, don't really look at something, they just want to snap a picture for their Instagram feed or for their TikTok, to sort of, you know, touch them in a way to put their phone down and to look at that. So these have been my thoughts beyond the questions which I asked.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's a huge difference between the way that cities work in the United States and the way that they work in Europe, both Northern Europe and Southern Europe. And certainly a very big difference between the way that cities work, you know, where you come from and where I come from, which is Southern Europe, but more on the east than on the west side, and of course Africa, you know. And what you see in the U.S., because of the background and the history and the culture, is that you know, cities essentially are empty. You know, they are places where you have, especially in the center of the cities, you know, you have activities that have to do with administration, with business, with sometimes even shopping, uh, big scale, and in the night they're away and they're empty. There's nothing there, and then life goes into the suburbs uh, where there's the same kind of emptiness because people retreat in their own homes and watch their own televisions. There is no life in the streets. Everybody has their own car. Everybody, you know, drives into the garage, and they don't want to see their neighbors. You know, the kids don't play out in the streets, you know, like we did, and there's this idea of, you know, privacy and publicness, and there's very few public places that are used as public places. You know, people mistake the mall, which is a private space, as a public space, but it's not. You know, it's the mall belongs to somebody, and they close it and they open it when they want, and you have to com, com, you have to comply with their rules, which are not necessarily, well, I mean, uh, they're their rules. Yeah, they have to comply also with the public rules and the laws and all that. But, you know, they can make a rule of their own and say, okay, you know, if you wear red, you know, we'll throw you out of the mall. They can make a rule and say, if you want to beg. You cannot beg here. If you want to, you're homeless and you want to sleep on my porch at night, you're gonna do this here, whereas you can do it anywhere else.
Socrates and Diogenes would have a problem in a
And
modern.
yeah, but you go to Paris, you go to Athens, you go to any of these places, and the streets are full of people all the time, all the time. These are very dense cities. There's very good public transportation. People don't necessarily, I mean, here in Paris is really amazing because you see so many people riding their bicycles back and forth to work. And in many ways, it's easier to ride your bike than to even take public transportation. So they have bike lanes and all that. It's pretty amazing. I mean, the bike traffic. And it's not mechanical bikes, it's just bikes, people pedaling around Paris, and it's flat, mostly flat, so it's easier. So you have that distinction, and Paris has, I mean, still inside the city. I mean, I see little kids playing soccer in front of the church, you know? I mean, you still have islands of real activity, and that means that the little kids live around the corner from where they're playing soccer, They don't live somewhere else. They don't have to be taken, like we do in the States, by their parents in a car to some nice green field to play soccer with the kids that live a few blocks away, right? So it's interesting the way that the city was because you said, okay, the center for religion, the center for it is not a center anymore in many ways, or it is not especially in the United States. Here in Europe, there is more of a centrality. In France, especially, there is the center of government. There is a center of there are many centers of religion. But also, what has really transformed all of these cities is that these cities, including Athens now, they have become the center of a new force. I don't know how permanent that force is going to be, but it's a very big force. And they are the centers of tourism. There's a new god now. There's the god of tourism. There's millions of people. In my island, which is a little island next to Athens, last year, I think there were something like 4 million arrivals over the year. Normally, the population of the island is less than 20,000 people. That's what so that shows you, what's going on, and these are people that come in and out, that match what they match what they see with what they're supposed to see because they have seen everything already on television, on social media and everything else. They take their selfies, they go and they buy things and then they go home. And say, oh, here, we were in, this and that island, and isn't that cool? You should go there. Next wave comes next year. Yeah. Yeah, all the, it's on the other hand, there is underneath all of this, there's still those old things that you and I talk about and other people talk about are still there. They have not been able, like the ancient gods are still there. The same sort of streams are still there. There is a beautiful poem by Robert Frost, and the poem is about this old farmhouse which lingers on while the city grows around it. And the poem talks about how things have changed and how the stream that goes in front of that house is now covered up and it becomes a road, you know. It becomes useful, you know, and it's hidden. But then at the end of the poem, it says, but there are days when you hear the roar of the water, you know, underneath, and you know that the stream is still there. And so, you know, this is it, you know, and you know, we're also talking about small segments of time. Time is very, very big. So, you know, we're talking about 100 years, or we're talking about 1,000 years, or 3,000 years, or, you know. So these things, they're not dead. They're not dead. They're alive and well. And, you know, they're keeping in, they're buried, but they're alive. I was talking to archaeologists, and and the we were doing a project in Volos. In Greece, wherever you dig, you find ancient things. You know, there's somebody else has been there before. And so they gave me a map of all they call them sostikes anascafes, the digs, the archaeological digs that are that will retrieve and save objects of the past. And so here is the map of this small part of the city, the ancient part of the city. And every time they dig to put some kind of electric line or some kind of a sewage line or to repair something that's broken, they find something else, and that something else belongs, and they know, because they're archaeologists, they know what it be. And so what they do is they take out whatever is movable and of value. They record where they found it, so they have maps, exact maps and all that. And then they rebury it. And I said to them, well, why do you repair, you know, why do you repair them? You know, why don't you, you know, find ways to. And they looked at me like, you know, you must be a total idiot. Said, well, I mean, don't you realize that the only reason that we have these things is because they were buried? And if we unbury them, if we really excavate them and show them, put them out in the world, you know, we have to be ready to do what the burial has done, which is to preserve them. And we're not ready to do that because it's too expensive. We don't have enough people. We don't have, I mean, they list all the things that they can't do. And so as long as you know that all these things are buried somewhere within you, and they're still alive, that's cool. And at some point they will come. And if they don't come, you know, with you, they will come with somebody else, you know. I'm always amazed with kids, not all of them, but, and it happens at different times. When they come out, you know, kids have that. And it is not because they've learned it. It's because it's there. So kids, you know, that will come out with these statements that say things that are profound, that are wise. And you say, well, where did you learn that? You didn't read it because you're in second grade. You know, you didn't hear it from me because we don't really discuss these things. And I mean, perhaps you got it because, but how do you know, my son, who is now 18, he was 10 years old, and he's a happy, very smart, very happy boy, very well adjusted to the world, alhamdulillah. And so he comes from school, he's always happy. One day he comes from school and he's not happy. And I said, well, what's going on? Why are you not happy? What happened to you? He said, oh, so-and-so punched me, hit me. And I said, oh, that's terrible. So what did you do? Did you hit him back? And he said, oh, of course not. I said, really? I mean, why? Why didn't you punch him back? He said, because this was his problem. It was not my problem. I said, did you meet Gandhi somewhere along the way? I mean, how did you come to that? This is I mean, he's a boy, he's 10 years old, kids hit each other all the time. No, 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 I'm not going to hurt you, because then he didn't explain all that, but he was like, no, absolutely not. That was his problem, not mine. So the aggressor's problem. If I hit him back, I make it my problem. So he didn't learn that. So something is in there, Something is in there, and you don't know why and how and all that, but it's in there. And I think, and it's probably a very naive kind of realization, that all of us have it. All human beings have it. Even the mullahs. Somewhere. Well, perhaps not. I
So,
don't know.
well, it can get buried. It can get buried. You once remarked that that's the divine spark within every human being. And you said, like, it's the job of a teacher to try to cultivate and bring out that sacred fire, that divine spark. But the trouble is, it gets crusted, it gets calcified, it gets built over time. And there was this idea in ancient psychology and understanding of humans that the age 40 is very important. Like there's this myth in Islamic period that if someone is sort of not guided by 40, after that, Satan kisses him on the forehead and he says, there's no hope for you. This was a warning, but I think what it meant to say is that it's very difficult. Of course, divine grace can arrive at any time.
Yeah.
But the trouble is, and I think the thing that mostly covers this divine spark is this illusion of learning, this amassing of text, particularly textual knowledge. And this was basically, this is, and I think it was in classical Sufi Persian poetry, the definition of a mullah, sort of an academic establishment, particularly academic, connected to power and wealth, which thinks his knowledge will save him. And this knowledge is mostly based on textual knowledge, Aristotelian logic. And this gives him this pride and vanity. And so I see that, I mean, one doesn't have to be religious. A lot of academics who are very haughty and proud, and, they are suffering from the same thing, while in the mysteries, in the high levels of ancient philosophy, try to break this. So they would sort of go through a ritual that would make the person forget to drop this illusion of knowing and to be a child again and to be reborn, And this is, I think, what a successful teacher, only a teacher can do, which is then becomes a hierophant, a psychopomp, a guide of the soul.
Yeah, that's I mean, what you said is so interesting, and that's one of the things that I thought I did not expect, but I always think about my visit to Iran was that beginning with my interrogations at the airport in Isfahan, and then continued, with a visit to various places, including the tomb of Hafez, late at night. The visit of Masjid al-Jami was in Iran, there is this, it looks like, to me, it seemed like there is this kind of appreciation of poetry. When after they interrogated me, and they found out that I was there because I wanted to learn more about the culture of Iran and all that, and I was not a spy from somewhere else or whatever. These are officers of the state in the airport in Isfahan said, oh, and and they spoke perfect English. Only one of them pretended not to know English, but he did. And then, the poem by Rumi that says, and they started, and the other one said, oh, yes, but also, you remember, there's the poem that is in the wall of whatever, that says, and they started, I was like stunned. Here is these people with military uniform, the young man, and we're in this, like, the boss's, room. Of course, they gave you tea and, cookies and things like that while they interrogated you. But and then they're reciting poetry. And then we go to the tomb of Hafez, and it's the night. And I said, I'm trying to remember the name of my student. Actually, it was the brother of one of my students that happened to be there, and he took me around. He took me to Persepolis and all these wonderful places, and he said, "Oh no!" I said, "Well, it's 9:30 at night. It's not going to be open." I said, "Oh no, yeah, it's going to be open." So we go there, and it's 9:30 at night, and there's 50 people there. And some of them are praying, and some of them are reciting, and some of them are just reading, and some of them just meditating. And I think, where am I? Where am I? What is this place, where people go to the tomb of a great poet at 9:30 at night? On any night, it was not like a holiday or an anniversary or something. It was any night. And then in Isfahan, I met this man on the plane, who was an engineer. He was probably a person much more like your family, His kid was studying in Sharjah or someplace, and he was going back to Iran, and I was the only non-Iranian on the plane. So I was stopped, and they took my passport, and that's why I had to go back and be interrogated the next day and all that. And he took me to all the police controls and all that. A man about my age. And the next day, he took me to a wonderful restaurant, where he knew the owner and all that, Shehrazad, in the center of Isfahan. And then he took me to see the bridges on the river. And we walked on one bridge, on one, the big bridge. And then we walked on top, the top part. And then we went underneath. And you're close to the water, these are all the dams that they have, the different levels of the river and all that. And it's beautiful because it's kind of dark and there's shadows, and you can see little pieces of the river and the city and all that. And we hear this music. It's like voices, but it was obviously a song. And we approach, and in one of these, under the vaults, there is a small group of people and two women that are wearing very colorful clothes, older women, and they are singing. They sing this magnificent song. I mean, I couldn't understand the words, but it was a magnificent song. And so Mr. Ogani was his name. Mr. Ogani says, this is a Sufi song, and it's all about love. And it's, the person and, his lover, and, we had talked a little bit about this, so he understood that I understood what it meant. And so we sat there for 5-10 minutes, and then the ladies stopped and they covered their bright clothes with these big black overcoats. So they adjusted their, hijabs, and they left. And there was a silence for a moment, and then these two young men got up and they started singing. And it was beautiful. And Roghani said, this is another love song. This is from, I don't remember, Saadi or some poet. And I said, where else in the world you find that? You tell me. Nowhere. Nowhere. So, and this was not, 500 years ago. This was, when was that? That was less than 20 years ago. In a place that is, as you better than me, is overrun by a very fundamentalist kind of narrow-minded administration, but underneath, So, these are the things that I think about, or at least I choose to think about, that make me feel that there's never poetry, beauty is what will sustain us. And, beauty is something that's divine. It's a gift. So that's what we need to survive. And that's my main, perhaps I shouldn't think this way, because a lot of this kind of architecture, we go back to where we started. A lot of this kind of architecture that is like that is produced by these architects today, not all of them, but many of them, is an architecture that produces monsters. Monsters, this monstrous architecture. And perhaps it is necessary because, I mean, there's part of the creative process is to create monsters. I mean, we have monsters in all of the religions and all of the traditions. There's monsters that appear, and there's monsters within us. So there's a function to that, to these sort of monstrous buildings. So I shouldn't be so critical, from my sort of pristine point of view of Western architect that grew up under the Parthenon. There's something about it. The dead bird. It's a monster,
And may the beauty of Pallas Athene destroy the
Yeah.
titans, or the monsters, and save Dionysius again, always.
Yeah. Habib, you see,
Yes.
you tell me, You walk, you go to Sharjah. Why? And you go to your class. And in this class comes this guy dressed in a very simple sort of distasha and a turban. And 20-some years later, we are here talking with one another.
About Kronos and Pallas Athene.
Kronos, yeah. And it's like, hey, what does that mean? For me, it's the most precious things in the world. Habib. I have to go, Habib. So we'll talk soon again. I'm going to think about Kronos until the next time. You gave me a homework.